Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. This is Watches Tonight. I'm your host, Tim Mosso. Thanks for joining me. This evening, we consider independent watch brand alternatives to FP Journe. We're going to talk about my favorite utility watches in each category, as well as yours. And of course, I'm sharing your viewer wrist chats from our friends far flung and near. Remember, there is no better place than thewatchbox.com to buy, trade, and sell watches, particularly when you want to sell. We pay cash, we pay fast, and we make the process painless and a no-brainer. But to buy, I have a new direct service email, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, for your questions about buying any watch you see on our website, any watch you see on Watchbox Reviews, and any watch you see on our social media, especially my Instagram. That is tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Jumping into the box, I can see Omegatron is first, Edward Ledden of Sweden, Matt Foster, McKinley Stevens, Russell 996 of the UK, Mr. No Date. We got Monkey V, we've got Cull Obsidian, the 95th Phantom, Tom P, we've got Nim, and guys, thank you for getting up early, staying up late if you are watching from far-flung around the world. Let's see what you've got for me. Viewer wrist chats, starting out with Robert L. Robert L. shares his single-year Patek Philippe 5961A ebony dial, black dial, flyback annual calendar, stainless steel. He took it off the bracelet and he put it on a strap. I love the look and I love the composition. The contrasting stitch is the clincher. Russell K. stuns with his Alango Unzona Zeitwerk Lumen limited edition, a real showstopper right there. Luciano M. cuts a striking pose, and I put the emphasis on cut with his Seiko SNK and Muela knife in Cancun. Nice ink, by the way, and good light. Abdul R. in the Black Forest of Germany proves that vintage Swiss integrated bracelet and case watches include more than the usual suspects with his Rado Quartz Day Date. Guys, send your wrist chats to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on my pixels, but I can go one better. I want to thank everyone who has submitted a collection and a proposal for meeting with me for the collector conversations. It's a casting call, guys. I'm bringing in collectors at first locally from roughly Boston down to Washington, D.C. to our Philadelphia office to film discussions of your collection, your history as a collector, your philosophy of collecting, and your future grails, your memorable moments and the watches that match them. We've had dozens of submissions that I had to take very seriously to the point where selecting these is actually becoming difficult. We've had over 50 total submissions. Thank you. These will be going global, so if you're in Singapore, if you're in Hong Kong, if you're in Thailand, if you're in anywhere from the Levant to Europe, Latin America, guys, we are going to be making this global, and eventually we will be flying people in. But for now, it's local. Everyone who's participated, thank you. Every one of you will be receiving a response from my office. Jumping into the box right here, Mark S. We got Adrian Burke. We got Alexei Simola of Finland. We have a question, what do you think of the Hulk discontinuing? Well, it's inevitable that every sub eventually will be discontinued. What are the chances that it's discontinued heading into Basel this year? Unless you know something that I don't know, I would say the Hulk will be discontinued when a new model arrives, just as the original Kermit was discontinued with the arrival of the 6-digit and the Super Case. I would love to see a green no date, green bezel, black dial as the follow-up, effectively a Cerachrome Kermit. Please, Rolex, make this happen. Now jumping into our regularly scheduled program, following our casting call, we have a question. Paul T asking, Journe seems to be following the path of Rolex and Patek prices. Can you recommend alternatives? Not only can I recommend alternatives, but I can do so with gusto. Let's stick with independent brands. Now, of course, FP Journe, making a maximum of 900 pieces a year out of Geneva, is a special brand. Especially if you love FP Journe and the mystique surrounding him, it's a great way to spend your money and buy an experience along the way. But some of the watches are waitlisted, and on the secondary markets, many of them are also marked up. There's also the culture clash. Sometimes you want a watchmaker, you want a brand figurehead who matches your personality a little bit more closely, and for a lot of folks that's not Mr. Journe. So alternatives, starting with my personal favorite, De Bethune of L'Auberson. This is a timepiece brand that only makes Grail watches. Literally every watch they make is an eye popper. No brand of a comparable size has spent more on research and development or been issued more Swiss patents. They are seriously a science house that happens to make watches, and they've pursued this almost to ruin in the past, but I consider that to be a feature, not a bug. Now right there you're looking at the DB28 Digital, a jump hour with scrolling minutes and a fired spherical moon phase that sits at the center of a blued titanium cosmos on a rose-lathe guilloche dial with spring-loaded floating lugs. This is not their only watch. They make literally dozens of models. If you take their back catalog dating back to 2002, you're going to find that there are only probably about 4,000 De Bethune watches in existence, and yet they're spread over, I would say, at least 100 different references, including piece unique. So you will find the watch you want. And with only 150 pieces made per year, I consider De Bethune to be about as close to a bespoke experience as you will ever get while buying a series production watch. Now, considering what I like to think of as the German-Swiss FP Journe, there's H. Moser Cie of Schaffhausen. Yes, the other vertically integrated manufacturer of Schaffhausen, Switzerland. Over at the eastern end of Switzerland, these guys make eye-popping watches, like De Bethune, but with perhaps a little bit more range. They make everything from those beautiful purity dials with the smoked fume gradient. They make everything from cosmic dials in green to lagoon dials in turquoise. They have the new Moser Streamliner Flyback sports watch with integrated bracelet that manages to look like no other integrated bracelet 70s tribute. They went with the Agengraph movement, which is their only sourced movement, as they make everything in-house right up to their balances, their escapements, and their hairsprings at their subsidiary Precision Engineering. And with about 1,500 watches made per year and an absolute comic cut-up superstar CEO, you're going to find something to love about this brand and people you can identify with at the manufacturer in Schaffhausen. Now finally, let's go a little bit more constrained. Let's get as close to a man and a brand as FP Journe itself. Let's go with Kari Voutilainen. Now Kari is himself incredibly accomplished. Originally trained at the Finnish watchmaking school at Tapiola and later working at the Wo-Step, he is an acknowledged master. Originally, he was called upon more to work for other brands and develop mechanisms and engineering solutions for others. But today, each year, his small company will make a few dozen examples of his primary references, with some of the more exceptional pieces such as Tourbillon or Masterpiece Chronograph produced in low single digits or even piece unique. Customization is possible. He makes his movements, he makes his cases, he makes his dials, and you might have seen his work, for example, on Grunefeld watches. Kari Voutilainen dials from Comblamin Cadran, his dial company, are as good as anything in the industry, with guilloche as well as lacquer and enamel available. If you want a watchmaker who's a little bit more of a type B personality, soft-spoken, quiet, but very friendly and agreeable, he's the type B counter to the type A of Francois-Paul Journe. And with a level of exclusivity that exceeds even Journe, you're gonna find the watch you like. You're never gonna see it again on anyone else's wrist. And because Kari is very open to customization, you're probably not gonna see another one even on a Google image search. It will be a true piece unique. Guys, let me know, are there any independent brands that you would prefer as an alternative as FP Journe watches increasingly become marked up and waitlisted? Jumping into the box right here, we have Adrian Burke saying, nice Zeitwerk, to our friend Russell from the UK, Zeitwerk for the kill. I see Mark S. is in the box, Dave Opencar, we've got Geezer, we've got Richie, we've got James Blackman, and then right here I can see we have Mr. No Date suggesting Laurent Ferrier, and I would agree with that. I happen to think that Ferrier watches are better finished internally than Journe. I think they're more nicely made on a finishing basis. They're not Geneva hallmark, but they are certainly of that quality. The combination of work from Laurent Ferrier's own office and La Fabrique du Temps, which is their movement supplier, is the best in the business. And with interesting horological innovations like the double spiral tourbillon and the double direct impulse escapement on their Gallet micro rotor, I happen to think that there's they're as technically interesting as they are aesthetically satisfying, and it's easy to get stainless steel watches from them, which means you don't have to pay a precious metal premium when buying from Laurent Ferrier. Richie joining from London. Richie, thank you for staying up late with us. I've got Saul, too, joining from Orange County, California. And then right here, bump, we've got Watch for Toe. We've got Darthibald Vaderfield. We've got Evan Goff. We've got Luciole. We've got Alexander Ritchie joining in from Seattle. And Adam Crossfire agreeing, Moser for the win. Blake Taylor saying, I heard FP Journe's a bit of a difficult guy. Two different ways to describe him. There's socially, where some people click with him and some people don't. I don't want to party with the guy. I think he is probably the most sincere, thoughtful, and historically informed student of watchmaking you could ever engage on a purely professional discussion. I could talk watchmaking with FP Journe anytime, and he is incredibly sensitive about history, who made what, when, and where, important contributions to the art, also philosophical reflections on why the 18th and 19th centuries were the apex of watchmaking as opposed to the modern day. That FP Journe I love. The FP Journe who goes out for a night out in the town is a little bit too intense for me, but he might be perfect for you. One size does not fit all in luxury watches. I can see Luciole joining from Montreal up in the Great White North, and Stephen UK1 staying up late in London. And then right here, Cassidy Atkins saying, I don't know about price, but Grunefeld are fantastic. Tim and Bart are really nice guys. If you saw the Dutch as portrayed in Spider-Man Far From Home, that's Tim and Bart. They'll lend you their cell phone if you ask. And then right here, we have Christopher Peterson joining in, and we've got Bobby Smith as well as Pilot Style 123 joining in from Ireland. Once again, thanks for staying up late from Europe. Pete's Timepiece mentioning correctly that Recep Recepi is a name to know and a brand to watch. I agree. If you can get on his wait list, either on his Recep Recepi brand or a Crivia, go for it. I also spoke to him once, and he was a nice, if somewhat reticent and quiet guy, but I kind of dig that. That's how I am in person. Let's take a look at your wrist chats, guys. Vincent S. showcasing his Omega Speedmaster and Need for Speed with Ducati motorcycles. Very nice. Simon H. and his Rolex Sea Dweller working in the yard with power tools, putting up some sort of a terrace in the garden. Robin T. and his Dodin GMT fly from Birmingham Airport in the hometown of Black Sabbath. And then John H. prepares for a move to Deutschland with his Eterna Adventic GMT from the original parent company of ETA. That's right, ETA in the 20s was spun off from Eterna. I also want to remind you guys to send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com. See your watches on my box. Mom, if you're watching out there, I want to send out a salute to my dear mother and my best wishes. She had a hip replacement today. It looks like it's gone well. I love you, Mom. Thanks for supporting me, even though I do a foolish, childish, and ultimately fatuous thing for a living. I appreciate that you always encouraged me and pushed me to do what I love, and you're the reason I'm here. I love you, Mom. Get well. Guys, jumping into our main feature tonight, jumping into the box, too, I can see Chip Wong saying, should I start a Porsche channel? Sure, but I think I missed the antecedent comment there. And we've got San La Muerte joining in from Toronto, once again up north. And then we have Mark S. saying, Tim is flying through the show. We'll be out of here by 6:28. I did suspect that my mom might be watching, so I decided to keep the show short since I think she'll be going to bed early tonight. And then we've got a question from Mohammed A. asking, do you think VC will make another American 1921? Yes. I think that's as close as they have to a design icon in their lineup. I think that needs to be an eternal watch for them. I would not be shocked if we started seeing blue dials, green dials, or even titanium and steel cases. So watch that space, and that, I believe, is what to watch out for. I would also not put it past them to make a complication like a chronograph or even a dual time on the American platform. It has the feel of an incipient model line for them. And then right here we've got Anastase P. joining in from Brazil. Thank you so much for joining in from Brazil. And then we have Daniel B. asking, Tim, why are you wearing the same watch for a year? You know, that is a great question. Probably because I've decided resolutely that I need to decide what my future looks like, and I'm a man of many passions, and I feel as though if I love cars as much as I do. Eventually, I'm going to succumb, and I probably need the funds to fund that particular weakness of mine. After all, maintenance, insurance, garage, purchase, it's a little bit more involved than watches can be. I love watches, I love wheels. I'm not much of a plain guy. I'll also say this, you're going to see some watches that I'm considering purchasing on Wednesday's Wake Up with Watches. So if you watch that show on Watchbox Reviews, you're going to get a direct inside line to what I like best and what might wind up on my wrist next. All right, guys, I can see right here, Mark S. thoughtfully wishing my mom well. I really appreciate that, Mark. And then right here, we've got Chip Wong asking, Tim, any idea on how many steel 321 Speedies Omega plans on producing per year? I would say realistically, the steel model, probably thousands. It's going to be a lot. Like if you're buying the 321 Platinum, it's going to be very few. But the steel model, I think they're going to ramp up. I don't think it's going to be the same level of finish we saw on the Onyx style watch with the platinum case. I do think that it's going to be more constrained than, say, the standard 1861, but I think in 2 or 3 years we will not discuss this as a rare or waitlisted or marked up watch. I think it's going to be a fairly mainstream piece. Now, jumping back into our regularly scheduled program, tonight's main feature is my favorite luxury utility watches. I find that the sports watch category is just too broad. After all, I understand that, for example, if you're diving, that's a sport, you might wear a dive watch, but a Heuer 1550 is a pilot's watch, it's utilitarian. But a Nautilus, which has no objective purpose, is also described as a sports watch. Is luxuriating by the pool a sport? I don't know. So whereas utility watches are often lumped in with the sports watches, I feel that it's much easier to define a utility or tool style watch. After all, the measure of a watch's utility is its ability to facilitate a job or a defined technical role. So while sports watches and utility watches often are discussed as one pool of rugged timepiece, I do think there's a difference, and I think that whereas sports watches have no definition, you're going to find utility watches are very sharply defined by their intended use. Now, of course, the man makes the watch, not the other way around. So could you wear something crazy like an Hublot Oceanographic 4000 with a suit? Sure. I don't think that's the intent, unless it's a diving suit. So here are my favorite utility watches from the dive watch, pilot's watch, driver's watch, and technicians/engineer watch categories. I want to know yours too, so comment in because I'm going to be reading the live chat as we go along. I've got ID guys saying I managed to catch Tim. Hi everyone. Thank you for making my live show. I really appreciate that right here. And then right here we have Mark S. noting that my mom does in fact wear a Zin that I bought her for Christmas. That's true. My stepdad also wears a Zin. And he got the full Diapol with the tegmented case. Like he got the works. Right here we've got Tanis D joining from Germany, the homeland, the fatherland of Zin watches. And then right here I can see Emily N joining in live alongside Neo and Blue Shirt Buddha, a regular viewer on the program. So here's my favorite dive watch. Guys, if you've been following me long term, you already know it's the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, and in particular, it's the 5015 reference. 1953 gave us our first Blancpain 50 Fathoms, and it did beat the Rolex Submariner to market by a few months, giving us the first modern format diving watch. I should also mention, I'll soon own one because I absolutely love the satin titanium blue dial model that came out at Baselworld 2017. That one just caught my heart and will not let go. You can see how it looks on my wrist. I think it looks swell. So the caliber, I should mention the caliber 1315 is a high horology movement in a utility style watch. The finish here, the mirrored bevels, the quality of the satination, the black polished screws, the thoughtful and unconventional finish that's applied, the unique Lamborghini inspired wheels of the drivetrain, all of this speaks to an attention to detail above and beyond. You also get a free sprung balance, a silicone hairspring, you get an anti-magnetic Faraday cage surrounding it, you get a 5-day power reserve, you get all of the refinements, including now 6-position adjustment that you would anticipate on something like a Patek Philippe, but then more above and beyond because you don't get a 5-day power reserve on a Nautilus. I should also mention that it is built and spec'd tangibly better than a sub. It feels more solid in the hand. The crown is less likely to wobble in the hand than a Rolex. And the bezel, while just as chunky when you index it, also has a cambered sapphire, so it's almost like it has a dewdrop permanently spread over its surface, magnifying the fully loomed bezel scale underneath. And it is an absolute circular supernova at night. 300 meters water resistant. When you put it on the wrist, you realize how solid it is, as the bars retaining the strap are held on by hex keys rather than spring bars, and the strap itself is sailcloth, almost indestructible. I love this watch. 300 meters, anti-magnetic, high horology, hand-finished movement inside. It makes its case as the best of the breed, even though the fundamental 5015 has been with us since Basel World 2007. There are a million variants. A million variants exist. That example in brushed rose gold with a blue dial is just one of a million. If you want an aviation-themed version, there is, of course, a Flyback speed command. If you want a motorsports-themed version, there is a carbon fiber dial speed command. You will find the one you like. Even if you want an all-white watch, there is a 5015 that looks like that, and of course there are 40 millimeter versions of the 50 if you want something a little bit more compact, but at 50 millimeters lug to lug with sharply downturned and stubby lugs, the watch wears almost like a lugless timepiece, which is why despite the 45 millimeter case, I say try it on a small wrist. I did, and I was a satisfied soon-to-be customer. Also, don't take my word for it. Peter Speakmarin on his website, The Naked Watchmaker, where he performs teardowns of mainstream watches, spoke incredibly highly of the watch and its movement when he did a full teardown from the complete watch to the base plate of the caliber. And I quote, by the way, link in the description to his full teardown. It is incredible and vividly illustrated with macro photos of every step. But I quote, "The construction of the case, including bezel and winding crown, is synonymous with one of the strongest available on the market today. Although quality is a subjective point of view, amongst all of the diver's watches I have handled," consider how many dive watches he's handled, by the way. "This one, combined with its Faraday-like cage, distinguishes itself." Link in the description to that review. Keep me streaming, open it in a different window. Jumping into the box right here, we've got Yahia Balba joining from Egypt. Thank you so much for staying up late with me. We got Gilbert Rios joining from Riverside. And then we have a question from Gilbert. What do I think of the Longines Big Eye? I like it a lot. I think it's a good watch. I also think that with Breguet Type 20s selling for about $5,000 pre-owned in steel and titanium, if I had to choose between a Longines and saving a bit more to get the Breguet, which features the same style Big Eye dial and the same vintage evocative styling and real heritage dating back to the same era, I would go with the Breguet. I just think it's more compelling, and it's a flyback and swimmable with high water resistance to boot. We've got Andy G joining in from London, England, staying up late with me. And then we got El Diablo with a pointed opinion on the Seiko and the knife. I actually thought the photo was pretty cool, so I'm going to differ with you right there. And then we've got Kevin C joining in asking, where do you send your wrist shots? Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com, Kevin. Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com. Now, jumping back to our regularly scheduled program, Pilot's Watch. You guys know I have mixed feelings about the Pilot's Watch genre because I've flown before. I was in naval aviation on the public affairs side for 4 years. I never caught the bug. I never fell in love with it. Give me wheels, not wings. But for those of you who soar high and fly high, I recommend the Omega X33. If your head is in the clouds, this watch should be on your wrist. The X33 launched in 1998 and built for civilian consumption till 2006. It remained in the military purchase program for service members for another 3 or 4 years. But it was the product of 5 years research and development by Omega, and it shows. This is a timepiece that is a real multifunction pilot's watch with usable features, ergonomics, a blistering alarm you can hear over an in-cockpit intercom, a light so bright it could almost blind you through your NVGs. Let me recount some of the reasons I included the X33 and not, for example, the Breitling Aerospace series. Here's the main reason, because when you're using the X33, you just press the crown to cycle the features, and then you use big, chunky, fixed buttons, 4 of them, to operate the function that you select. All of which is to say, unlike the aerospace, which forces you, with your presumably gloved hands, to rotate a crown in subtle, partial twists to cycle through the functions, and remember, it's easy to overshoot. The Omega makes it easy. Bang the crown that only moves in and out to cycle through the functions, and then press those big, chunky, individual physical buttons to operate the functions of the watch. And you get a countdown timer with that blistering alarm. You get a professional grade backlight, digital and analog. By the way, that backlight, that's the real deal. And you can see the digital and analog. I would also mention that the watch features a chronograph, mission elapsed time, so you know the time elapsed since you started. There is, of course, the chronograph, but there is both a time of day alarm and there's a countdown timer. So if you have a time to destination and you need to be reminded of the time, that alarm is going to serve you well. I would also mention that it has 12 and 24-hour formats for those times you spend on the ground. For me, that would be most. It also has a useful perpetual calendar, and it is low glare with a brushed titanium case that's designed not to reflect extraneous light into your eyes. I love this watch, and you can pick them up for between $2,000 and $3,000. I recommend getting the 2nd series watch if you actually want to use it in the cockpit. It's just a little bit more refined, and if you can, look for the D series version of the caliber 1666, because that alone, among the 4 versions of that high-end quartz caliber, was thermocompensated to deal with high and low temperatures. And then right here, let me remind you, and I've sung its praises recently, we have the Breitling Navitimer Spatiographe. This is a watch that was made from 1997 to 2002, 41.5 millimeters in steel, many different dial variants, but the caliber 36 was a complication module made by Breitling on top of an ETA 2892. It still has the Navitimer circular slide rule bezel, it still has the chronograph capability, but added is a 10-minute countdown, specifically devised for use in a landing pattern, and every 30 seconds it will adjust itself so you can watch the countdown from a pre-programmed 10 minutes. The early versions feature tritium, the later versions feature luminova. The early versions are not chronometer certified, however, and the later versions are. I love this watch, and again, I've only seen about 2 or 3, one of which was in the collection of a pilot who refused to sell or trade the watch. So you can see just how endearing this piece is, the best of modern Breitling. I'm also going to mention a watch that you don't think of as a pilot's watch makes my wrist, not so much for flying, but for everyday use. It's important to remember that Cartier Santos, and I'm citing the 2019 Cartier Santos Blue, it was born in 1904 as a pilot's watch. It is a utility watch as a result, built for a purpose for those who fly dirigibles back when you needed a wristwatch because you would need your hands, both of them, to pilot this large and physical machine. You couldn't be reaching into your pocket, into your vest. So you could operate your dirigible while looking at your wristwatch. And thus the first pilot's watch was born, created by Louis Cartier for his Brazilian aviator friend Alberto Santos Dumont, who started out with dirigibles and eventually did work his way to fixed wing. But I think that well, first of all, I need to remind you that this is still a class of aviation timepiece. There are those still alive Navy veterans who had the naval blimpers pin, the naval dirigible pin. It was a 1/2 wing shield and anchor aviator's qualification pin. And I remember down in Pensacola, there was a little shop that sold these things right across from the cemetery. I know you naval aviators will recall it immediately. And they still sold that pin for any older veterans who might want to reacquire one to wear, and thus legitimizing the notion that a blimp aviator's watch is a pilot's watch. Let's take a quick look at the 1904 version, and you can see what it looked like originally. It also inspired Louis Cartier in 1909 to invent the first deployant clasp so the watch could not accidentally be dropped. And thus the story of the Santos, my 3rd favorite pilot's watch on the show tonight. Jumping into the box right here, I see a comment that the calculator on the Navitimer is a circular format. That is correct. It is a circular calculator principally for multiplication and division. And then right here, we've got Bent Remy saying he's a fan of ID Guy's content. I guess ID Guy must be another YouTuber right here. And then we had a question about Omega 8500s, but it got away from me. And then we have a question from Daniel B. Do you wear a watch when you're biking? No. Motorcycles, yes. Road bikes, no. And Emily Ann is asking, I want to meet someone who actually knows what all of the scales on the Navitimer are for. And that's where the comment about the circular slide rule came from. They still train naval aviators, and any good pilot's training program on the civilian side will show people how to use, I want to say it's called like an A6B or something, but it is a small circular slide rule that is exactly what you find on the Navitimer. It's about the size of your palm rather than a Triscuit, but it's the same principle and it's the same mechanism. Now, jumping into the chat one more time, we have Captain Zed saying there are some nice smaller Navitimers pre-owned for around $3,000 or $4,000. That is true. You're not getting the Spatiographe for that money, but you are going to get a Navitimer for that kind of cash. And then there's a question from Tanis Downhiller. Is there an alarm watch for under $1,000? Yes. You can old Seiko alarm watches from the 70s for under $1,000, and those are remarkable because I believe not only do they wind themselves, but I believe they automatically wind the alarm too. I also think you can still score a vintage Omega Memomatic from the 1970s for around $1,000. Anything other than that, you're probably going to be looking at some sort of a quartz alarm. So if you're looking for a mechanical alarm watch, your best bet is probably vintage Omega or vintage Seiko. And then we have David G asking, did they improve the Santos or kill it with the redesign? There's no questioning, they killed it in the best possible sense. The 2018 Santos, especially the 19 Blue version with a loomed dial, is close to a perfect sports watch. You've got loom, you've got a cushion case that's true to history while fitting on any watch. It's only, I want to say, about 47 millimeters lug to lug, 39.5 millimeters wide, 9.4 millimeters thick. It's got a soft iron anti-magnetic cage for those times when you magnetize your watch against your laptop speakers. It's 100 meters water resistant, and the bracelet can be removed with a quick release system, but it goes one better. Every individual sizable link can be removed with a fingernail. You can size the bracelet with your fingernail, and because it comes with both a bracelet and an accessory strap, you get both for the sub $7,000 price of buying that watch in steel, and you get a lovely gradient blue dial with applique metal numerals on the blue version. So I think they did a great job with the redesign right there. And although it's basically an ETA 2892 drop-in, the MC 1847 automatic movement is Cartier's own inside the case. Okay, now jumping in here, we have Ben Stahl asking, Tim, what motorcycle do you ride and what watch would go with a 1975 Honda CB750? I used to have a lovely little air-cooled Ducati Monster 620 when I was in the Navy. I loved that bike, but after I hurt my knee cycling, I wanted to kind of focus on rehab, and I realized that just one bad day on the motorcycle could set me back years, so that was the end of my motorcycling. But I would love someday to own a Moto Guzzi Griso SE, the 10E model. That would be awesome with the 8-valve engine. 1975 Honda CB750. I mean, saying some sort of a Seiko would be too obvious. So let's go with something that has a nice nostalgic feel to it, a 70s motorsports vibe. I would go with the original 1970s Oris Chronoris Star. Open a new tab, look it up, but that's what I would go with for riding a CB750. Like the Honda, it was a gearhead's value proposition. Tremendous machine for the money then, tremendous vintage collectible today. So that would be my choice for you and your CB750. And then right here, We have Matthew P. reminding me to breathe. I do sometimes forget, so that's good gouge, as we used to say in the Navy. Jumping back into our regularly scheduled program, Driver's Watch. Okay, here's where we get into our ground-bound motorsports. I'll never compete at Reno, but then again, someday I might compete in shifter karts. And I love the Moser Cie Streamliner, which is new for 2020. This is a motorsports watch and a driver's watch. Can we go full screen there, Sean? Sean operating the switcher tonight. You'll note a racing dial with a staggered hash mark checker pattern, just like the Omega Speedmasters with the racing dials. But it's also a fume gradient, fading from a sort of brown-black at center to black at the edge, with a to-die-for vertical satin grain. And note the use of a central register chronograph. You have the minutes and the seconds at center, as with a Lemania 5100 or with the Zinn SZ01 in my EZM1. You have twin pushers located to be used with ease when the watch is on the wrist or when held in the hand as a stopwatch. And they got everything right. The size is right. 42.3 millimeters by 14.2 millimeters thick. It's not too thick. And in stainless steel with a 120 meter water resistance. Everything about this Flyback chronograph is perfect. 54-hour power reserve, exotic movement, gorgeous bracelet and case integration. I love that they paid tribute to the motorsports chronographs of the 70s, including the Omega lobster tail bracelet, without copying another Nautilus or Royal Oak wannabe design. Everything about the new Moser Streamliner, and they're making 100 pieces initially at $40,000 a piece, but I love everything about it. It's not another Me Too watch in the integrated bracelet vintage-inspired segment. The Agengraph caliber that's inside, by the way, is absolutely stunning. Beautiful finish, brilliant engineering, 54-hour power reserve, dial side winding rotor that allows you to see the entirety of the case back, column wheel actuation, standard flyback mechanism. You'll see it also in the Singer Track 1. This is as good as it gets in a high horology, created by Agenor, which, among other notable achievements, created one installment of the Harry Winston Opus series and a clutch mechanism of their own design that gives you the visibility and beauty of a lateral clutch, but with the jump-free smooth actuation of a vertical clutch. This is as good as it gets, guys. And again, 100 pieces for 40 grand. I think it's probably the best vintage-inspired integrated bracelet sports watch offered by anyone. The cleanliness of that dial, the integration of the case and the bracelet proves that Moser has both an imagination and a soul, increasingly rare in this industry. MB&F and the HM5. Possibly the least loved of the MB&F horological machines, but one of my favorites along with the HM4 Thunderbolt. This is a watch, if we can go full screen right here, that was designed for driving. Launched in 2012, it is both a driver's watch and visibly car-themed. The retractable louvers on the case back, you can open them to charge up the discs of the hours and the minutes, but you can open up the louvers to charge up the discs for nighttime use. You open them during the day. They echo the slats that were popular on late 1960s and 1970s sports cars. If you know what that car is, you are of one mind with me. No one needs speak its name. It's a feeling. It's a goddess. And I have to say that while unfortunately the Great Bull is not available to most of us and not accessible, the HM5 is one of the best buys in used MB&F. I've seen them sell for under $20,000 in stainless steel and zirconium. So a damn good buy in a world where people pay $25,000 for a used Daytona. 51.5 millimeters by 49 millimeters. It's a chunky thing, but it also has no lugs. So that actual measurement across the wrist, 51.5, is the entirety of the watch. And I would also say that it is the lateral digital jump hour display that makes this one a natural driver's watch, as when it is on your wrist and your hand is on the wheel, you can look down without moving your wrist and you can see the jump hour and minute display. And now you see why I say you can charge it up by opening the louvers. They are actually reflected at 90 degrees from the horizontal by a lens system. That's how the louvers open up and actually light up those discs which lay flat underneath the louvers. And you're looking at a reflection system that bends the light so they appear to be standing straight up. It is a very cool watch. And Girard-Perregaux provides the base automatic caliber 3100, so it uses a GP movement customized for MB&F. Agenor, once again, builds the module. Those are the people behind the chronograph movement in the Moser. They build the module for this HM5, and it's appropriate that GP provides the base movement because officially, I should mention that while it's not the inspiration for the HM5, the Girard-Perregaux casquette of the 1970s, the reference 9931, looks exactly like this watch. Although, if you ask Max, he's going to say that his true inspiration was the 1970s Amida Digitrend, and I'm not going to argue the point. I can see the family resemblance. Now, I should also ask, what would you drive with your favorite driver's watch? Because I have my favorite companions for driving with a watch of my choice. With either the MB&F or the Moser, I would prefer to drive the American-made Panoz AIV Roadster. It's featured on the show before, a tribute to the great Allards, Shelby Cobras, Healy Silverstones of the 1950s and the 60s. It's also built by a racing team that has won, among others, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the 12 Hours of Sebring, and the Petit Le Mans, all of which is to say it's the real deal. And with only 176 made, I should probably add that one to the collection sooner or later. The market eventually discovers. Camaro. Not any Camaro, but the Z28. $25,000 of Camaro, add $50,000 of track equipment, and you have the previous 5th generation Camaro Z28. And then finally, the Corvette, not any Corvette, but the C5 Z06, the one that weighed 3,000 pounds on the nose, with 5.7 liters of 400 horsepower Detroit aluminum, not iron, underneath the hood. That is about as spare as a sports car gets. 3 pedals, rear-wheel drive, V8, 1 cam, in the block, overhead valves, no magneto-rheological suspension, no dual clutch transmissions, no 4-wheel torque vectoring system, just basic I know how to work a clutch driving pleasure. And I must also say a little bit of edginess. When you got a 3,000-pound car with 400 pound-feet of torque and instant throttle response, you do need to know what you're doing. This is one of those cars that drives a little bit like a sport bike. You should not get acquainted with 1,000 cc's the first time out. Work your way up to it. And jumping into the box right here, I have a comment about riding a Yamaha, and I really like that. Let me see if I can find that. I have William B. joining from Valparaiso, Indiana, wearing his Rolex Explorer 2 Polar 5 digits. And then we had a great comment. Zonda saying, give me a Ferrari 275 GTB and a Vacheron 1921. Good call. Give me a 275 GTB long nose personally. And then right here we have Stephen UK saying, I love these 70s design. Dave Opencar saying, big block vet. That's another one that's a little bit like that Z06. It shouldn't be your first waltz as sports cars go. And then right here, Darth V is saying that I would take a Roger Smith and a 1994 Chartreuse Dodge Neon. Don't laugh at the first generation Neon. The Neon RT first gen was actually a very respectable SCCA single class racer. And then right here I could see, and as something saying with the Moser, you'd want to drive a vintage green 911 Targa. I really like that proposal. That works well for me. An old school air-cooled Porsche will always be near and dear to my heart. Simon Holt saying 2 days till my 1997 997 Targa is finally paid off. 5 years of pain, now I can drive it knowing it's mine at last. Congrats, my man. My colleague Brandon is actually shopping for a 9972 Carrera 4S, so I'll let you know how that goes on the show. And then Nick J is saying, MB&F and Urwerk are cool watches, but they are pricey. If I were to choose between the two, it would probably be the MB&F. And then High and Rising asking, is Govberg opening a car dealership? No, but then again, this channel is sort of at my mercy, and I'm a car guy. And finally, Brick Lane saying a Zeitwerk and a Vanquish. Which Vanquish, second generation or first generation? I'm all about the old Ian Callum car. Now, Technician's watch. We finish up with my favorite Rolex, the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Milgauss Z-Blue, launched in 2014. This is about as much fun as you can have in a modern day Rolex, from a French-Swiss watch company that's often been included in, I would say, the brands we calculate and categorize as a little bit more conservative, a little bit more stolid and buttoned up. Even though based in Geneva, we've often discussed Rolex as sort of carrying on the spirit of its German-born founder Hans Wilsdorf. And this watch proves that they've got a little bit of French-Swiss in them all the same. I love this watch. It's a watch that is descended from the original 1956 6541 and 6543 Milgauss, from the 1019 Milgauss of 1960. It's a watch that was born of the basic 40mm watch that arrived in 2007. It has a long and glorious heritage. While it'll always be the nerd's Rolex, that makes it perfect for me. And with this style, it has enough charm, enough character, enough charisma that I get a different vibe from the watch. You've got a green crystal, an orange seconds hand, orange printed features on the dial, and of course that explosive metallic turquoise dial base that defies description. I'll go with Rolex's term, Z-Blue, and it zings me. 40mm, anti-magnetic. It has an anti-magnetic escapement. It has a Faraday cage. Well, actually, it's a soft iron cage. It's not designed to channel current around the movement. It's designed to channel magnetic flux and field lines around the movement. So we're not going to call it a Faraday cage. But it's got the cage, the anti-magnetic movement, the niobium zirconium hairspring, parachrome blue. It is probably more than 1000 Gauss or Milgauss, and I am going to test one of these against an MRI. That is a work in progress. $8,300 after the Rolex price hike. I still consider it a bargain, as it's available right now at Rolex dealers without a wait and used without a markup. Jumping into the viewer wrist shots, closing with your pieces on these pixels. Frank from New Jersey, a local boy, tri-state area, shares his Omega Seamaster Professional Diver 300 meter on a NATO strap. Love that chrome dial with this Triumph in the background. Love our motorcycles on this channel. Phil M. of Florida is flying high again with his Rolex Explorer 2 Polar. Clive W. shares his daily driver from Omega and his Grail watch from Lange. George Y. lights the way home for us with his Rolex Submariner no date and a nice loom shot. Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com for your purchase questions, guys. If you want to buy a watch from our website, if you want to buy a watch you see on Watchbox Reviews, if you want to buy a watch you see on my Instagram, that's Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com. And guys, let me make a movie recommendation. I was almost moved to tears by Ford versus Ferrari. I have never seen a movie that more completely captures what I love about cars and the romance of auto racing. If you feel at all like I do, that's gotta be on your watch list. Cue it up. Thank you so much. Thanks to Sean operating the switcher tonight and everyone who joined in. Time out, Tim out, and thank you for logging on.